Hello and welcome to the Farming Today This Week podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, the dry weather adding to farmers' challenges this spring.
We're in a better place than we were last year, but it needs to rain in May. Literally planted my sunflowers today, and my sugar beet certainly needs it as well. An inch would be a blessing, half an inch would be a delight.
And we talk trees and the benefits they can have on farm, from soil.
The trees are providing a reservoir for some of the most important species of beneficial fungi, mycorrhizae, in the soil, and that's spreading out into the crop.
To pest control.
I read a book about the hidden life of trees. There was a paragraph in there that said that pheromones were given off by walnut trees that discourage flies. So we've planted 20 round the milking parlour and collecting yard, and they certainly have an effect. And now you get the added advantage of walnuts.
More on that later. First, the UK's second largest greenhouse, which could replace 7% of the tomatoes the UK imports, has been given the go-ahead. Rivenhall Greenhouse near Braintree in Essex will cover 40 hectares and use power from a domestic waste incinerator, burning all the black bag waste from the county. It'll grow 28,000 tonnes of tomatoes every year. Anna Hill spoke to the project director, Ed Morehouse.
We believe it is very much the future. Primarily, it is a mechanism for us to fix one of our most expenses, namely energy, and the other one being labour. So it makes us immune from geopolitics and spikes in energy and other such things that we're seeing at the moment.
I was going to say, at the moment, this is crucial, isn't it? We've been reporting since February about the added cost of the effect of conflict in the Middle East on all forms of food production. So how secure do you think your system is going to be?
I think very is a simple answer to that. And all of Essex's residential black bag garbage is going through the end of our site. So that is operational for about 94% of the year. And it means that there is always a feedstock coming in because people throw stuff out. And therefore, by default, we will always have a source of heat, carbon dioxide and electricity. So the waste facility is there for over 50 years, as we are. So we see that very much as a sort of a really efficient way. And we've calculated about 70% less carbon intensive of producing food, at a fixed energy price for the long term.
You said there was a World War II hangar, which you're changing to vertical farming, which we know is usually things like strawberries grown under LED lights. How easy is it to convert a building like that?
The site next to the facility is an old airfield that's now been quarried. So it's the last remaining hangar. We inherited it as part of the land deal. And it made an obvious example of going, well, if we put a vertical in, it means I can either do leafy salads or herbs for a supermarket and have that as a similar offering to the vine crops. Or I think another very interesting angle that we're looking at is actually having it as a propagation hub, because it allows us to not bring in propagated material from the Netherlands, but to do it on site in a much more biosecure environment, particularly for tomatoes and strawberries.
Ed Morehouse there. Well, farming with the changing climate in mind is something we've been talking about all week on our sister programme, Farming Today. We've been hearing about the benefits of agroforestry, which in simple terms is farming with trees in the mix. It can be quite an initial investment, but those who've made the change say it has improved their farm and saved them money. Well, Stephen Briggs is a UK agroforestry pioneer. He took on a tenant farm on the edge of the fens in Cambridgeshire 20 years ago and introduced trees at a time when really no one else was doing it. He was, though, convinced it would bring more biodiversity into the farm and to make it more productive and resilient. Mary Ward-Lowry has been to have a look.
When Stephen first came here, he found soils that were biologically and structurally degraded. His priorities were
reducing soil erosion, building resilience, increasing habitat and biodiversity, and making money. That's really important. We're tenants here on the farm, so we needed something that would deliver us an economic return within the 15 years of our farm business tenancy. I remembered some work that I'd been doing, living and working in Africa as a soil scientist, where I'd come across tropical agroforestry. And I thought, can we do something like that here? Can it deliver in a temperate context? So I did an Nuffield farming scholarship, travelled the globe, looked at agroforestry, came home, went completely bonkers mad and put half the farm into agroforestry. Over a 52 hectare block, we put in 4,500 fruit trees. And what we've created here is a three-dimensional farming system. So we've made the farm bigger by going vertically, both up and below.
So I can see there's a sort of strip under the trees which doesn't have rape on it. It's quite easy to see because the rape's in flower. So how big's that strip?
The strip's 3 metres wide and they're sown with pollen, nectar, species, wildflowers, legumes, etc. We spent about £65,000 on putting the trees in. We ended up with a return on investment after about 7.5 years.
This isn't a research farm, but there are currently 5 PhD students working here to document the impact of the agroforestry project. Although the trees only take up 8% of the land area, so 92% is still growing arable crops, the researchers have found a 400% increase in pollinators and a 10 times increase in species richness. So these rows of pink blossomed apple trees punctuating the rape and the wheat have been good for biodiversity, but it's the impact on crop productivity that has surprised Stephen.
As you look down the alley behind us, we were expecting the crops would yield normally in the middle of the alleys and then they would taper off on the shoulders toward the edges, so like an upturned dish, because of the competition from the trees. However, now it's mature at 20 years old, we've experienced something quite different. It's like a sort of proper dish, so that the crops nearest the edge of the alleys, adjacent to the trees, are yielding and performing better than the normal level of production in the middle. And that wasn't what we were quite expecting.
Why has that happened?
The research has shown that it's not down to a single thing. In the winter we're getting some increased drainage on this low-lying land from the deep tree roots. In the summer when there's quite often a water deficit for the crops, the reduction in wind speed reduces in not only lower levels of soil erosion but reduced evapotranspiration, so you're creating a microclimate. So that bit of shading and a bit of wind reduction.
The rape is protected.
But moreover, the trees are providing a reservoir for some of the most important species of beneficial fungi, mycorrhizae, in the soil, and that's spreading out into the crop.
And there have been other benefits too.
Over the last couple of years we've had a few incidences where just prior to harvest we've had sort of significant storms, high levels of wind, hail last year. And in the half the farm where we don't have the agroforestry, we've had occasions where we've lost 20% of the grain, whereas in the agroforestry we've probably halved those losses by reducing the wind speed and therefore the violence of the impact of that storm.
Stephen Briggs there in Cambridgeshire. Well, at Abbey Home Farm near Cirencester in Gloucestershire, they incorporate trees into all their growing, be it salads, fruit or veg. As well as planting between crops outside, they're using fruit trees inside the glasshouse to shade the produce and introduce useful insect predators. Sally Challoner met head grower Andy Dibben under the glass.
So we use this very much for deep midwinter, very short day length production, get much faster growth, and now we're going into, and you can just notice how much hotter it is when we come in here, and no wind at all. So we grow trees in here for a completely different reason. And we'll wander down the bottom and I'll show you.
Yeah.
So basically, what we have in here, what we're looking at, is fan-trained nectarines.
Kind of like a wall of tree, aren't they?
Yeah.
So like a hedge, really.
Pretty much. We fan train them so they're kind of north-south. So as the sun goes across the sky, the crops on either side of the trees get a really decent amount of sunlight. But the predictions are that our summers are going to get hotter and hotter and hotter. So we can easily get up towards 40 degrees in here. So shade becomes really, really important. I mean, who would have thought we'd have said that in England like 20 years ago? If you take a tomato crop, tomato pollen denatures, so it doesn't work, at 28 degrees centigrade. So as soon as our temperatures go above that, we're getting an impact on our yield of tomatoes. So we get shade for our crops in the summer. Nectarines, we get late frosts here. We could never grow nectarines outside because we'd lose the blossom too often. And the thing that wherever we have the trees, we're organic, we don't use pesticides, so we need to enhance predatory insect populations to do that job for us. Trees are the most amazing habitat for all life.
Obviously outside in the field you don't need to worry about where the roots are growing, but here it's right next to the crops. Do you have to worry about the trees taking the nutrients, taking up space?
That is such an important question, and like all of these things, there's not a lot of research to base this stuff on. There's a big learning curve, and you've just hit the nail on the head about the biggest lesson we've learnt. So we actually have to prune the roots, basically. So we actually use a very sharp spade, or we put in physical barriers. And that means that almost like the fan-trained tree, the roots grow in a linear way underground. But it's something we've learnt about and we have to actively manage. And it's the same out in the fields. But we'll have to use a deep blade on the back of a tractor to keep those roots away from the cropping areas. You have to foresee and manage the positive interactions between trees and crops and the negative interaction between trees and crops.
Andy Dibben there. Well, seeing livestock in woodland is perhaps the form of agroforestry we're all most likely to know about, from pigs snuffling for acorns to sheep and cattle searching for the shady or wind-free spots by the hedge. But can there be other advantages? Well, one organic dairy farmer in Shropshire says the health of his 300-strong dairy herd has improved since he planted willow trees on his pasture land. Tim Downs got the idea after attending a conference in the USA in 2014 and says his cows now have fewer issues with fertility and ailments like mastitis, as properties in the trees have benefited their health. Bob Huckenhall reports.
As the trees were very young, over the first 5 or so years, they were protected with an electric fence. We took that away. Hindsight, I probably should have left some sort of protection because the bulls that were out during the wintertime used them as rubbing posts, and some of them have ended up not being vertical anymore. But the cows thoroughly enjoy them. There's one over there scratching on the established tree.
At the moment, the trees aren't in full bloom, obviously, and in fact, you've done some work on them recently, haven't you?
Yes, so after the really serious drought last year, we chopped them off at around about 4 to 5 feet high, allowing them to sprout again and protect the base of the tree. And then the branches and twigs will be chipped and used in gateways or in the biomass boiler as well. So there's an end use for the willow branches. And then I'd like to replant any missing trees as well.
They'll soon grow again.
Willow will grow anywhere, yes. So we've done some research both with the Woodland Trust, Nottingham University on mineral content. They extract minerals from the soil, chiefly selenium, cobalt, copper, and all useful to animal health. We're after improving palatability. We have made tree hay in the past, but the idea we are most keen on is having them as an easy care browsing species. The animals actually do the harvesting in the field. They also contain a high level of salicylic acid, the willows, cracked willow and white willow we've got here, and that's a main ingredient in aspirin. So anti-inflammatory, pain relief, a fantastic way of improving animal health.
And as regards the health of the cows, what have you noticed since you've had these trees here?
They're healthier in very many ways. So being an organic herd producing milk for the American market, we're concentrating heavily on reducing antibiotic usage. We've not used antibiotics in the dairy herd for over 10 years now, and part and parcel of that has been looking at alternative treatments and making sure that the animals are given the best possible forage and nutrition, and trees have an active role in that, I believe. That's the main reason for including them in the diet. It's reduced the stress on the animals, and stress is a big precursor to fertility problems, lameness problems, mastitis problems, all those sort of things. And I think the trees that we've planted have added to our herd health hugely.
We've mentioned the willow trees, but you also got walnut trees here. Tell us why you decided to plant them.
I read a book about the hidden life of trees. There was a paragraph in there that said that pheromones were given off by walnut trees that discourage flies. So we've planted 20 round the milking parlour and collecting yard, and they certainly have an effect. And now you get the added advantage of walnuts. They've been in about 10 years now, and they're providing shade and shelter from any strong winds. But the most important bit is fly control as well. And we've seen that in evidence in the milking parlour. We get very few fly issues now.
Tim Downs. Now, hedgerows do count in an agroforestry system, and Nigel Adams is one of the country's leading experts on them. He's recently published a book. Our reporter Howard Shannon met him to look at examples of the good, the bad and the ugly.
This hedge here, talk me through. This is an example of a hedge that you feel isn't in a very good condition.
This hedge has been trimmed at exactly the same height, probably for 60 years or more. It originally would have been a hawthorn hedge, an enclosures hedge as we call it. The hawthorn has practically all disappeared. If we look in the bottom, we can actually see old signs of hedge laying. So it's been invaded by elderberry. Blackthorn is starting to come in, but there's so many gaps. There's literally not enough stems in this hedge.
Why shouldn't a hedge then be cut at exactly the same height?
I truly believe that a hedge has got to go through a bit of a life cycle. So there are going to be times in its life when it's cut short, and there's nothing wrong with cutting hedges at all, but then we need to let it go on through its life cycle, develop in size, in height, and then once in a lifetime, every hedge on a farm has to be rejuvenated. We can coppice it to ground level and get the regrowth on that, or we could lay it. This thing has gone way past. Perhaps I could take you and show you a hedge where we've allowed it to breathe a bit.
Well, Nigel, I've just driven a couple of miles down the road from a hedge that you felt wasn't a very good example to a hedge in front of me. This looks beautiful.
Every time the farmer's cut this, and he's cutting it on a 2-year trimming regime, he just increased the size of the height and the width by about 3 to 4 inches, just that little bit. So in the last 10 years, this hedge has increased in size. So now it's about, 2.75 metres high. It's nice and wide. It's dense. Now the hawthorn blossom is not quite out yet, but you can see it's just about to appear. You can see it's loads of insects already feeding on various things in the hedge, bits of bramble within it. It's a nice, thick, dense hedge.
Now, Nigel, you've been talking about hedge laying, but what are the horticultural principles behind laying a hedge?
If you think of a hedge is full of shrubs, and it is in effect a woodland edge. Humans then learned to plant these things in straight lines, and they could see that if they partially chopped into the stem, bent it over or laid it over, then it would stop animals getting through. And it's kind of using the ability of a shrub to regrow if it's pushed over or smashed over. Is what we're doing in hedge laying, and that's the rejuvenation that I think is so important for every hedge.
Hedge layer Nigel Adams. Conflict in the Middle East could cost up to 10 billion meals a week globally because of the impact on the availability and price of fertiliser. Well, that warning came this week from the boss of one of the biggest fertiliser companies, Yara. Sven Tor Holsether, chief executive of Yara, told the BBC that reduced crop yields as a result of lower fertiliser use could lead to a bidding war for food. Although the UK is very unlikely to face food shortages, the increased costs facing food producers are expected to start showing up on weekly food bills in the next few months. Well, as we've heard this morning, increases in the price of energy and fertiliser are a big concern for farmers here, as is the weather. It's a bank holiday weekend, so it is bound to rain, and that will come as a welcome relief to farmers after a dry and windy April. Some parts of the country, notably in the east of England, had between 2 and 4% of the expected rainfall last month. Well, that feels a lot like last year, when the dry spring led to a loss of yields and even failed crops, and that hit the bottom line of farming businesses. Some farmers are warning that without rain soon, we could see the same again this year. Edward Vipond is Farms Director at Troston Farms in Suffolk, covering nearly 2,700 acres across 4 sites.
I'm in a field of spring barley, and I think the word is patchy. Lack of rain, 4 millimetres in April, has not helped.
When did you last have useful rain?
Well, I got excited by 1.5 millimetres, which is an alarming thought, but 1.5 millimetres on Monday. But that has gone, long since gone, with a strong easterly wind.
How much rain would you expect in April?
We'd be in the 30, 35, 40 millimetres as a rule. We're just way off that, and having had that on top of a fairly dry March. We're in a better place than we were last year, but it needs to rain in May.
What impact did the dry spring have on the farm financially?
Last year we were devastated. We were at least 30% down on winter crops, if not more on spring crops, and we had a real problem with beet moth in the sugar beet as a result of the extreme temperatures.
Because of all that, plus the rises that we've seen in the price of things like fuel and fertiliser, some farmers haven't planted spring crops this time because they couldn't see how they could make any money on them.
It's an alien concept that we have to maybe think more about. I've been born and raised to grow things, and to not grow things goes against the grain. But with fertiliser, energy costs as they are, it's not a bad shout.
Might you be thinking about it when you're making plans for autumn planting?
On my light, friable soil, without doubt. Without water, I am in trouble.
It is looking more changeable and cooler, according to the BBC weather forecast, for the bank holiday and beyond.
That will certainly help. We need an inch would be a blessing. Half an inch would be a delight, and we do need it. I've just literally planted my sunflowers today, and my sugar beet certainly needs it as well.
Some people might wonder why you don't just irrigate.
Well, it's not. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to. On certain soils on the farm, we do for root crops, for onions and potatoes, but for the cereals, we simply haven't got the ability to irrigate. It's a licence by the EA, and we can't just make a borehole or pump out of a river. It's illegal.
Would it be worth doing, even if you could?
On the cereal crops, I'm sceptical. Once you start irrigation, you've got to continue, and the labour cost in turn of that, you may not get that back in yield.
So really it's just a rain dance, is it?
It's a rain dance, and it's not working at the minute, but let's hope the bank holiday weekend, for all the wrong reasons, is a wet one.
Edward Vipond. So will he be rain dancing for the whole of May? Well, Simon King is from BBC Weather.
April has been really mixed actually across the UK. So there are some areas that have been really wet. And as you might perhaps imagine, that's towards the northwest of Scotland, where they've actually had 1.5 times their normal April rainfall. But it's towards the southeast where it's been exceptionally dry. And we know really that Cambridgeshire and Bedfordshire, for example, have had one of their driest Aprils on record. And Shoebury-Ness in Essex, well, that's recorded less than 1 millimetre of rain in the whole month. Now, normally they'd expect to see around about 36 millimetres. So really is quite exceptionally dry there. So around 2% of what they would normally expect to see throughout April. So for that location, that has been the driest April on record for Shrewsbury-Ness as an example.
So it's the Saturday of a bank holiday. Obviously, we're expecting rain, but farmers are really hoping that's going to be the case.
Well, this is it. So, yeah, you said a bank holiday weekend. There is rain in the forecast, more so on the Sunday, but the wettest places are likely to be across Wales, the Midlands, up into northern parts of England. Now, in those driest areas of East Anglia and the southeast of England, I think perhaps we might see around about 6 to 10 millimetres of rain over the next few days. So that might be useful rain, but it's, of course, not going to do a great deal to those statistics where it's been very, very dry. As we go further into May, well, high pressure comes back in. And as we probably are aware, high pressure means the settled weather, the larger dry weather, but it will be just situated to the northwest of the UK. And that means that will allow some weather fronts to come in across the south. So actually, it's in southern parts where we might well see more useful rain as we go into April. We could see perhaps up to 20, 30 millimetres of rain there. And then looking further ahead, long-range forecasts are always open to lots of uncertainty, but our thinking is that for the second half of May, the indications are that low pressure is likely to affect the UK, so we may well see near seasonal precipitation amounts in the southeast of England, perhaps be wetter than average across the northwest. So hopefully there are some signs there for farmers, for water companies, that perhaps we might get to see a bit more rain than certainly we had in April.
Simon King there from BBC Weather. Now, will you be up early tomorrow morning to listen out for this? It's Dawn Chorus Day tomorrow. What a glorious sound. And all next week on Farming Today, we're going to be listening to other sounds of the countryside. But beyond tractors and cows mooing. So what sound do worms make in the soil? And what about bats or hedgehogs? Well, that was recorded in our producer's garden, and we'd love to hear some of your countryside sounds to play in next Saturday's programme. It will have to be short, no more than 30 seconds, please. And you can send it to us via our email, which is farming.today@bbc.co.uk. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Sally Challoner, and Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.